Every Sunday a boy visited the same forgotten grave. Never spoke, never smiled, just left wildflowers and walked away. No one knew who he was, not even the billionaire who passed him every week, until one day he followed him. What he discovered shattered everything he thought he knew about his past, and revealed the one person he had failed most. That quiet boy at the cemetery, he was his son. Welcome to Hearts and Billions, where the rich meet the broken, and one moment changes everything. Love, loss, redemption, all in one story. Subscribe to feel every heartbeat. Please kindly take me to 1,000 subscribers. Every Sunday morning, before the sun had fully risen, a small boy walked alone through the city streets. He never spoke. He never smiled. He just walked, with a quiet purpose in his step and a small, trembling hand holding a bundle of wildflowers. He couldn't have been more than 9. Skinny, pale, eyes too old for his young face. His clothes were always the same. An oversized grey hoodie that swallowed his frame, jeans that dragged against his shoes, and sneakers so worn that one sole flapped when he walked. The only thing that changed was the bouquet, not from a flower shop. These were picked from cracks in the sidewalk, under fences, behind buildings. Dandelions, weeds, a few crushed petals. But he treated them like roses. He entered the cemetery through the side gate. No one ever stopped him. He didn't cause trouble. He walked past clean, polished headstones with gold lettering and marble angels, past families kneeling, lighting candles, whispering prayers. But he never looked around. He walked straight to a forgotten corner of the graveyard, where the grass was patchy, the stones crooked, and no one ever visited. There, beneath a leaning tree, was a single grave. So old the writing was barely there. No flowers, no photographs. Just 3 words worn into the stone. She waited here. He would kneel in front of it, every time, with a kind of reverence. Gently, he placed the wildflowers at the base of the grave, smoothing the earth around them with his small hands. And then he'd sit, sometimes for half an hour, sometimes until the sky turned orange. He didn't cry, but sometimes he'd whisper, only a word or two, so soft, not even the wind could carry it. The cemetery groundskeepers noticed him after the 3rd week. They started calling him Little James. "He don't bother nobody," one of them said. "Just comes and goes, like he belongs to the place." One day, one of them asked him gently, "Who you here for, son?" James didn't answer. He just looked at the grave, then turned and walked away. He always came alone, always left alone, and every week the same quiet ritual. A boy, a grave, and a love the world never noticed. He was too young to carry that much sorrow, but he did, like he was born with it. No one knew who lay beneath that old stone. No one knew why he came, but even in silence, even in stillness, little James was speaking. It was a cold afternoon. Grey skies hung low, and the wind carried the kind of chill that made people hurry indoors. But inside a sleek black car, parked at the edge of the cemetery, a man sat perfectly still, watching. His name was Mr. Alden. To the outside world, he was a billionaire. CEO of Alden International. Private jets, mansions, the front row at galas. A man who had everything except peace. He never came to cemeteries. He didn't believe in grief, didn't believe in looking back. But today, his driver had taken a wrong turn. They were on their way to a silent investor meeting when traffic backed up. "Let's cut through the old district," Alden had said. Now here he was, waiting in a quiet black car beside a crumbling cemetery wall. And that's when he saw him. A boy, alone, walking through the iron gate like he'd done it 1,000 times. The child couldn't have seen the car. It was tinted, hidden beneath the trees. Alden watched curiously. The boy held a handful of crushed flowers in one hand and walked with a limp. His shoes were falling apart. His hoodie swallowed his frame. But what struck Alden most was the stillness in him. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to children. The kind that comes from pain. He watched the boy walk all the way to the far end of the cemetery, to a place where no one else seemed to go. The boy knelt by a stone so weathered it looked like part of the earth. Alden leaned closer to the window. The boy was smoothing the dirt with his hand, placing the flowers like they were something sacred. Then he just sat. Didn't check a phone, didn't look around. Just sat, with a sadness Alden recognized more than he cared to admit. Something twisted inside his chest. He didn't understand it. Why would a boy that young come alone to a grave like that? Why did it feel familiar? The driver spoke up. "Sir, the alternate route's clear now." But Alden didn't answer. He was still watching the boy. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something stir inside him. A feeling he had buried, just like the woman in that grave. He didn't know yet. Not about the letter. Not about the name on the stone. Not about the blood connection that would shatter his world. But he knew this. That boy didn't belong to the street. And something about the way he knelt, quiet, loyal, broken, made Alden stay a little longer. Even billionaires get lost. But sometimes, fate drives them straight to the one person they were never supposed to forget. The boy was still sitting by the grave, head down, hands resting in his lap. The wind tugged gently at his hoodie. A single flower petal fluttered across the dirt beside him. Mr. Alden remained in the back seat of his sleek black car, watching in silence. There was something strange about the stillness between them. The boy by the grave, and the man in the shadows. Then it happened. The boy looked up, just for a moment. His eyes lifted, scanning the cemetery slowly. And for 1 second, one fragile, quiet second, his gaze met Alden's through the tinted glass. Alden flinched. The boy's eyes were dark, tired, full of questions no child should carry. Not scared, not angry, just searching. Like he was waiting for someone to recognize him. Like he had been waiting for a long time. Then just as quickly the boy looked away. He wiped his nose with his sleeve, stood up, and gently pressed his small hand to the cold stone. It was a goodbye, but also a promise. Then he turned and walked off the same way he came in. His footsteps slow, his shoulders small against the wind. Alden sat frozen. Something about the boy's face, it lingered. Something about his eyes felt familiar, like a memory just out of reach. He rolled down the window slowly, hoping to hear the boy's voice. But the child said nothing, just silence. And then he was gone. The driver asked again, "Should we go, sir?" Alden didn't answer. His eyes were still on the old grave beneath the tree. "Who is he visiting?" he asked quietly. The groundskeeper nearby, sweeping dead leaves, shrugged. "No one knows, sir. He just comes every Sunday. Same grave, same flowers, never talks to anyone." "Does he have family?" "Not that we've seen. He leaves before anyone can ask." Alden sat back, the window slowly closing again. But the boy's eyes, they stayed with him. Eyes that looked like someone who had lost too much. Eyes that reminded him of a woman he once knew, someone he hadn't thought about in years. He didn't know it yet, but the past he tried so hard to bury had just looked him in the eye. That night, Mr. Alden couldn't sleep. He had 1,000 things on his mind. Business deals, pending contracts, calls from Tokyo and London. But all he could see were the boy's eyes, and that silent grave beneath the tree. Something about it felt unfinished. The next morning he returned. No driver, no suit, no guards. Just him, alone, with cold hands and a restless heart. He walked through the cemetery gates with hesitation, like he was stepping into something he wasn't ready for. The grave was still there. Same place, same silence. But now, no boy. Alden approached slowly. The wildflowers from the day before were still there, wilted now, some crushed by the wind. He knelt down, brushing leaves off the surface of the stone. It was old, cracked, covered in moss. He squinted at the faded letters. The name was almost completely gone, erased by time, weather, and neglect. But one line remained, carved faintly beneath the erosion. "She waited here." That's all. No first name, no last name, no date. Just those 3 words. Alden stared at them, and something inside him cracked. She waited here. Waited for who? For a friend, a husband, a child? Or had she waited for him? His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't understand why he felt like crying. He had attended dozens of funerals, sent flowers to hundreds of graves. But this one felt personal. Even though he didn't know why, he felt like he had failed her. And then he noticed something new, a small folded piece of paper, half buried beneath a rock at the base of the grave. He picked it up carefully. On it, written in a child's shaky handwriting, "I still come every week. I still miss you." I wish he knew. No signature, no explanation. But Alden's hands shook. Who was he? And why did he feel like that letter was meant for him? He stood in silence, the letter clenched in his hand, as the cold wind brushed against his face. Behind him, the city roared. Cars, deals, meetings, headlines. But here, in this forgotten place, a boy had come, a woman had waited, and a truth was whispering through the silence. He just had to be willing to listen. Mr. Alden couldn't stop thinking about the letter. I still come every week. I still miss you. I wish he knew. He read it over and over that night, his hands trembling as he held the wrinkled paper by his bedroom window. He didn't know who wrote it, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was written for him. The next Sunday, he returned to the cemetery, early, before anyone else. He parked down the street and waited. Not in a limousine, this time he drove himself. The cold air crept in through the cracked window. His breath fogged the glass. Then he saw him, the boy. Same gray hoodie, same slow steps. This time, he held something different in his hand. Not flowers, an envelope. Mr. Alden's heart beat faster. The boy walked the same path, past the fancy graves, past the angel statues, straight to the lonely stone with the words, "She waited here." He knelt down again, but instead of placing flowers, he gently laid the envelope at the base of the grave. He rested his hand on it like it was something precious, then leaned in and whispered something so soft the wind swallowed it. Mr. Alden stepped out of the car, quiet, careful. But before he could reach the boy, the child stood up and walked away, quickly this time, like he didn't want to be seen. Alden hurried to the grave. He picked up the envelope and slowly opened it. Inside was a crayon drawing, a stick figure woman, long hair, smiling. Next to her, a boy with a sad face. And beside him, an empty figure outlined in black, no face, no name. At the top, written in red, "Me, Mommy, and him." Alden's throat tightened. He could barely breathe. There was a note on the back, the same handwriting as before. "I know you're busy. I know you forgot. But I didn't. I still come. I still love her. I still wish you knew me." Tears welled in Alden's eyes. He sat down, right there in the dirt beside the grave, completely silent. He didn't understand everything yet, but he was beginning to. This boy wasn't just visiting someone. He was holding on to her, and he was reaching out to him. Mr. Alden didn't go to work the next day. His office called. His board panicked. But he didn't care, because that little boy, the one with the envelope and the haunted eyes, had just reopened a door he had slammed shut 10 years ago. He sat in his private study, the envelope and drawing in front of him. The woman in the child's picture, the one labeled Mommy, her smile, her long hair, it stirred something deep in his memory. Could it be? He picked up his phone and made a quiet, rare call to his head of security. "I need you to find someone quietly, no noise. Just answers." "Who, sir?" Alden's voice shook. "Her name was Clara. She worked here a long time ago." Clara had been his housekeeper. Kind, soft-spoken, always humming as she worked. She disappeared suddenly, without a goodbye. Back then, he didn't ask questions. He was busy with business, with power, with his empire, and maybe with guilt. Now he wanted answers. Within hours, his team returned. "Clara passed away nearly 9 years ago, sir. She was buried in a public cemetery under an unmarked grave. Her final address was a shelter. No family listed." Mr. Alden's hands clenched. "What about the boy?" "There was mention of a child," his assistant replied. "No name, no records. Just one note from the shelter. Clara left quietly with her son. Said she didn't want him growing up in a house that didn't want him." Alden stood up, the world spinning around him. He hadn't just lost a staff member. He had lost someone who tried to tell him the truth, someone who tried to reach him, and was ignored. That night, he returned to the grave once more. He knelt beside it, like the boy had done so many times. "Clara," he whispered. "Was he? Is he mine?" No answer. Only wind, only silence. But in his heart, something clicked, something undeniable. He had money. He had buildings with his name on them. But this grave, this envelope, this child, was his greatest unfinished story. And he was finally ready to face it. Mr. Alden waited all week. He went to the cemetery early that Sunday, earlier than ever before. He stood near the same crooked tree, no car, no bodyguards, just a man in a long coat, holding a heart full of guilt. And then, just like always, the boy came. Same hoodie, same quiet steps, same bundle of wildflowers, now even more wilted than before. Mr. Alden's chest tightened. He stepped back slightly, not wanting to scare him, but today something was different. The boy didn't kneel. He stood before the grave, clutching the flowers tightly, his small face twisting. And then his voice broke the silence. "I hate this place," he whispered. "I hate that I don't know who she really was. I hate that he never came." Alden froze. The boy's voice was shaking, but he kept going. "She told me once that my dad was important, that he had a big name, but he never showed up, not once." Tears slid down the boy's cheek. He dropped the flowers. "I come here every week. I talk to her. I write letters. I dream of him showing up just one time, but he never does." Then he turned, his eyes locked with Mr. Alden's. Sharp, wet, angry, hopeful. Neither of them spoke. Seconds passed, but the air between them felt like a lifetime. Finally, Alden stepped forward, his voice low. "You don't know me, James, but I think I know you." The boy narrowed his eyes. "How do you know my name?" Alden's lips trembled. "Because your mother worked for me. Because she tried to reach me, and I wasn't there. Not then." James took a step back. "Who are you?" Alden's voice cracked. I might be your father." Silence. The boy stood still, staring at him, processing, breathing, not moving. Then he turned away. "If you were my dad," he whispered, "you wouldn't have had to guess." He walked past Alden without looking back. Mr. Alden didn't follow. He stood alone beside Clara's grave, his heart shattered wide open, because the truth wasn't just painful. It was earned. And now it was up to him to prove he was more than just a man with money. He had to become the father he never was. It rained hard that Thursday, the kind of rain that soaks through your coat and chills your bones. Mr. Alden sat at his office desk, but he couldn't focus. The numbers on his laptop blurred. The meetings felt empty. He kept seeing that boy's face, his voice, his tears, his words. "If you were my dad, you wouldn't have had to guess." He hadn't slept in days. Then his phone rang. It was one of his investigators. "Sir, we found him." An hour later, Mr. Alden stood in front of a quiet foster home on the edge of the city. No cameras, no suit. Just a nervous, broken man holding a letter in his pocket. The staff welcomed him cautiously. "You're here for James?" "Yes." The social worker nodded gently. "He's been here 2 years. Doesn't talk much. Won't open up to anyone. He draws. A lot. That's all he does. That's how he copes." Alden swallowed hard. "May I see him?" They led him to a small, plain room. James sat in the corner on the floor, hoodie on, sketchbook in his lap. He didn't look up. Alden stepped in quietly. The room smelled like crayons and rain. He didn't speak, just watched. James flipped the page, and there it was. A drawing. 3 people standing in front of a grave. A woman with long hair, a boy, and a tall man in a coat, face half-shaded, hand reaching out. Alden's voice broke. "Is that me?" James looked up, startled. Then he nodded once. "That's my dream," he said softly. "I draw it when I miss her." Alden knelt beside him. "I'm not a dream, James. I'm real. And I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." James looked into his eyes, long and deep. Then he whispered, barely audible, "Are you really him?" Alden pulled the letter from his coat pocket. The one Clara had tried to send all those years ago. The one no one ever gave him. "Your mom tried to tell me. I didn't see it. I didn't listen. But I'm listening now." James stared at the letter, and for the first time since his mother died, he reached out. He placed his small hand on Alden's and didn't let go. Because sometimes the rain doesn't just wash away pain. It clears the way for something new to grow. Mr. Alden returned the next day. No assistance, no fancy car, just him holding 2 cups of hot cocoa, both half spilled from the shaky drive. He sat on the edge of the foster home couch, awkward and quiet, while James sat cross-legged on the floor, sketchbook balanced on his knees. Neither of them said much, but that silence, it wasn't cold anymore. It was nervous, hopeful. After a while, James flipped to a fresh page and picked up his pencil. Alden watched in silence as the boy began to draw, not looking up, not asking permission. Lines took shape, soft, careful, confident. After a few minutes, James turned the sketchbook around and held it up. Alden's breath caught. It was him, but not the businessman, not the billionaire, not the face from newspapers or financial magazines. It was him as James saw him, sitting on the ground beside a grave, eyes full of sorrow, but reaching gently toward a small boy beside him. And on the boy's face, a smile. A real one. Not wide, not perfect, but real. Alden stared at the drawing for a long time. "You drew what I couldn't say," he whispered. James shrugged a little, then looked down. "I didn't know if I could trust you," he said. "So I drew how it feels when I think about what it could be. If you stayed..." Alden reached for the sketchbook gently and placed his hand over the page. "I will. I'm not going anywhere now." James looked up again. This time he believed him. That night, Alden framed the drawing and placed it on his office wall, not as a trophy, not as art, but as a promise. Because in that drawing, his son had given him something more valuable than any business deal, a second chance. The drawing said everything. But Mr. Alden needed one more thing. Proof. Not for James, not for the world. For himself. Because deep down he already felt it. In the boy's eyes, in his voice, in the way he stood at that grave with quiet dignity. James was his. 2 days later, a nurse gently swabbed the inside of James's cheek. The boy didn't say much. He just sat there, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. Alden gave a small smile. "It's just a formality," he said. "I already know the truth." James looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "What if it says you're not?" Alden paused, then knelt beside him. "Then we'll tear up the paper. And I'll still be here, because I've missed too much already." James didn't answer, but for the first time, he leaned against Alden's shoulder. 3 days later, the results arrived in a sealed envelope. Alden held it in his hands, staring at it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He was alone in his study. No reporters, no lawyers, no boardroom, just silence. He opened it slowly, read it once, then again. Then he sat down and covered his face with both hands. Positive. 99.99%. James was his son, his blood, his child. The boy he didn't know he had, but somehow always felt the absence of. Later that day, Alden returned to the foster home. He didn't knock. The staff already knew. James was in the same corner, drawing again. Alden stepped inside, took a breath, and said just one thing. "We're family." James froze, then turned around slowly. He saw the paper in Alden's hand, but what mattered most was the look in his eyes. James smiled, small, quiet, but real. And in that moment, without a single word, he knew. The man in front of him wasn't just a visitor. He was home. It was Saturday afternoon. The sun peeked through grey clouds as if it, too, was trying to smile again. Mr. Alden arrived at the foster home, not in a limo, not in a suit. Just a father, standing nervously with a small backpack and a folded paper tucked in his coat. James was waiting, not hiding, not sketching, just standing by the doorway, with hope in his eyes and doubt still quietly tucked behind it. Alden knelt down and opened the backpack. Inside were art supplies, real ones, a sketchbook with a leather cover, pencils that hadn't been chewed down, paint still sealed. And then he held out the folded paper, the DNA results. "I brought proof," he said softly. "But I'm not here because of a test." James didn't move. "I'm here because I want to be your father. Not the man who missed your childhood, but the man who's ready to be there now, every day. For everything." A long silence stretched between them. And then something amazing happened. James took a step forward and hugged him. Not tight, not fast, but with both arms and with trust. Alden closed his eyes. He didn't care about the headlines or what people would say. All he felt was the warmth of a son he didn't know he had, choosing him anyway. Later that evening, they sat side by side on a bench in the cemetery. Just the two of them beneath the crooked tree beside Clara's grave. James placed a new bouquet of bright flowers, and Alden gently set down a small stone plaque beside the old one. It read, "Beloved mother, never forgotten, finally reunited." They didn't speak much, But they didn't need to, because for the first time in a long time, James wasn't alone, and neither was Mr. Alden. The cemetery looked different now, not because the stones had changed, not because the tree had been trimmed, but because James wasn't alone anymore. He stood beside Mr. Alden, his father, no longer a stranger, no longer a question mark. The cold wind brushed their coats, but the moment was warm. In James's hands was a bouquet of white lilies, his mother's favorite. Alden held a small plaque made of polished stone. He knelt beside the old grave, the same. One that once read only, "She waited here." Now something new was placed beside it, a fresh, beautiful headstone. It read, Clara Grace Matthews, beloved mother, gentle soul, you waited. Now we've come, forever in our hearts. James touched the lettering gently with his fingers. She would have liked that, he whispered. Alden nodded. She deserved more, so much more. James looked up. You really didn't know? Alden's voice cracked. No, but I should have. She tried. I wasn't listening then, but I promise you, James. He turned to his son, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. I will never stop listening now. Tears welled in James's eyes, but this time they weren't heavy with grief. They were soft, lighter. Can we come back every week? He asked quietly. Alden smiled. Every week, every year, as long as you want. Later that day, back at the house, Alden surprised James with something he never expected. A painting commissioned from James's favorite art studio. It showed Clara, James, and Alden standing in the cemetery together, holding hands under the tree. The title on the bottom read, The Family That Found Its Way Home. James stared at it for a long time. Then for the first time in his life, he called someone Dad. And for Alden, a man who once thought love was weakness, it became his greatest strength. Mr. Alden had rooms in every country, suites in glass towers, villas by the ocean. But now he was building a room that truly mattered. For James, the boy didn't ask for much. He was quiet, polite, careful with every word. But Alden had been paying attention. He remembered something James once said, barely above a whisper. She used to say, when we had a real home, I'd have a room with stars on the ceiling. That was all it took. A week later, James stepped into his new bedroom for the first time. He stood frozen at the door. The walls were soft blue like a calm sky. Bookshelves lined one side, already filled with sketchbooks, comic books and art kits. A big window let in golden light, and above him on the ceiling, a galaxy. Tiny LED stars twinkled in soft patterns. Some moved slowly, like shooting stars across the sky. In the center was a glowing crescent moon. James looked up and didn't speak. He just breathed deeply. Like for the first time, he could exhale. Do you like it? Alden asked gently. James nodded. Is it okay if I sleep with the lights off now? Alden's eyes watered. Of course. Later that night, James lay in bed, tucked under a warm quilt, his sketchbook resting beside him. Alden stood in the doorway, watching him, his son, his second chance. Good night, James. James didn't reply right away. Then softly, Good night, Dad. The word echoed through the hallway and through Alden's chest. He turned off the light. The stars above them still shone. And for the first time in years, Mr. Alden didn't feel alone. Years passed, but some things stayed the same. Every Sunday, Mr. Alden and James still visited the grave under the old tree. Fresh flowers, fresh memories, no longer in silence, now with stories and laughter. James grew, from a quiet boy into a kind, thoughtful young man. Still an artist, still gentle, but now with purpose. One day he stood in front of a brand new building. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't a tower. It was a small art school, filled with bright colors, broken kids, and big dreams. Above the door was a sign, the Clara Matthews Art Center, for every child who feels unseen. Inside, walls were lined with drawings, some framed, some taped up with love. And in the center of the entrance hall hung one large painting, a man kneeling beside a grave, a boy beside him holding his hand, and above them stars. At the bottom it read, The Man Who Found Me at the Grave. Underneath that was a simple quote. Sometimes love waits in silence until someone finally listens. James stood beside his father at the grand opening. Reporters asked questions. Photographers snapped pictures. But Alden just placed a hand on his son's shoulder and smiled. "This isn't about me," he said. "This is about a boy who never gave up. And the mother who never stopped waiting." That night, under a sky full of real stars, James sat on the rooftop, sketching quietly. Alden joined him with 2 cups of cocoa. "Are you happy?" he asked. James looked up. The stars reflected in his eyes. "I am now." And Alden was too. Because love doesn't always knock on your front door. Sometimes it waits beside an old grave until you're finally ready to find it.